Well, at a NATO summit today in the Netherlands, Donald Trump completely reversed himself on the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. A complete Trump reversal. And Donald Trump finally agrees with every president since World War II that NATO is a good thing and a good deal for the United States. Every other president has known that every day of their lives before they became president and every day that they served as president. And every president not named Trump acted accordingly with NATO. Donald Trump spent 4 years as president of the United States being completely wrong about NATO, saying repeatedly that it was what he called a ripoff. That was his term for NATO. Donald Trump threatened repeatedly not to even consider defending other NATO countries if they are attacked. That is the central principle of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, as expressed in Article 5. That is Article 5 of the NATO agreement that every NATO nation supports. Today, Donald Trump, the slowest student in the history of the presidency, said this.
As far as Article 5, look, when I came here because it was something I'm supposed to be doing, but I left here a little bit differently. I said, I watched the heads of these countries get up, and the love and the passion that they showed for their country was unbelievable. I've never seen quite anything like it. They want to protect their country, and they need the United States. And without the United States, it's not going to be the same. Without the United States, they couldn't really have NATO. It wouldn't work. It wouldn't work. It will in the future because now they're paying much more money, but it wouldn't work. It was great. And I left here differently. I left here saying that these people really love their countries. It's not a ripoff, and we're here to help them protect their country.
So that is a complete reversal by Donald Trump. And saying that NATO countries are paying more money, of course, is a misstatement of the situation. NATO countries are spending more on national defense so that they can use that additional spending to help Ukraine defend against Vladimir Putin's war on Ukraine. That is why NATO allies are spending more money on defense. Donald Trump's complete reversal on NATO will not likely be one of the headlines of the Trump participation in the NATO summit because Donald Trump speaks in such hard-to-follow gibberish and because Donald Trump tried to turn his public speaking at the NATO summit into a triumph for a war president that he is now pretending to be. As we reported last night, the United States assessment of the bomb damage that Donald Trump's bombing of Iran delivered is inconclusive, which makes sense when you're trying to bomb things that are underground and hard to tell how much damage has been done. The Trump administration assessment of the bombing obtained by NBC News, quote, concludes that the U.S. airstrikes on Iran's nuclear enrichment sites were not as effective as Trump claimed, and that they set the Iran nuclear program back by only 3 to 6 months, which completely contradicts Donald Trump's claim that Iran's facilities were obliterated by the American bombing. Obliterated is Donald Trump's term, and only Donald Trump's term. No one else is saying that about the bombing. Donald Trump believes that the use of the word obliterated means that he personally did not just end the war between Israel and Iran, but that he personally won that war.
So I have, as you know, Marco Rubio with me and Pete Hegseth, Secretary of State and Secretary of War. Should we say Secretary? You know, it used to be called Secretary of War. Maybe for a couple of weeks we'll call it that because we feel like warriors.
We feel like warriors. Of course, Donald Trump feels like a warrior. Donald Trump, who evaded military service during the Vietnam War because he claimed his foot hurt, the same foot on which he spent the rest of his life playing endless miles of golf and never limping, There is no reason to believe that Donald Trump wasn't perfectly healthy enough to serve in the military during the war of his youth. But like most men who were eligible to serve in the Vietnam War at that time, Donald Trump was terrified of being sent to the jungles of Vietnam and becoming another statistic in the American military body count that was far greater than all of the wars, the American wars of the 21st century combined. And so Donald Trump, who only had to choose which ridiculous hat to wear when he went to the Situation Room to be a spectator during his war in Iran, now feels like a warrior. The war that Donald Trump experienced in that air-conditioned room where he didn't even have to loosen his necktie makes Donald Trump feel like a warrior. The biggest crybaby in the history of American politics now feels like a warrior. The man who spent every single day of his political and presidential life complaining that he is being treated unfairly now feels like a warrior. The man who told his insurrectionist mob that he would go to the Capitol with them on January 6th now feels like a warrior. We all know that Donald Trump's gibberish in public speaking is very hard to follow. It is also very hard for 79-year-old Donald Trump to follow his own gibberish while he's saying it. And Donald Trump proved that again today when he contradicted himself in the middle of his public comments. Donald Trump was unable to adhere to his own line of argument, his own talking points, that his bombing of Iran has completely solved the problem there, ended Iran's war with Israel, and eliminated any possibility of Iran developing nuclear weapons. That was the line of argument Donald Trump tried to present and did present. And then Donald Trump stumbled into saying this.
You just said you believe the conflict between Israel and Iran is over. What makes you so confident it is? And what do you do if it isn't?
Because I dealt with both, and they're both tired, exhausted. They fought very, very hard and very viciously, very violently, and they were both satisfied to go home and get out. And can it start again? I guess someday it can. It could maybe start soon.
It could maybe start soon. Remember after Hitler killed himself in the bunker and World War II and Europe ended? Remember when President Harry Truman said, can it start again? I guess someday it can. It could maybe start soon. No, Harry Truman didn't say that. And remember when World War II ended with Japan's surrender? And Harry Truman said, can it start again? I guess someday it can. It could maybe start soon. No, President Harry Truman didn't say that, because every president other than Donald Trump has known when a war has ended and when a war has just taken a pause. Think of how breathtakingly ignorant you have to be about both Iran and Israel to say that they're both exhausted and they just won't fight anymore because they're both tired. Israel has fought longer wars and has used more resources in those wars than it used against Iran. Israel does not get tired of defending itself. Donald Trump was probably speaking for himself as both tired and exhausted. And that's why he's completely incapable of thinking about what happens next. But on his best day, Donald Trump isn't capable of thinking about what happens next in any situation, tired or not. Donald Trump is the first president of the United States to be convinced that Iran is just going to give up any interest in nuclear energy or nuclear weapons.
I don't see them getting back involved in the nuclear business anymore. I think they've had it. They've been at it for 20 years, and I don't see that happening either.
And immediately after saying that, Donald Trump, 79-year-old, tired and exhausted Donald Trump, after all that jet lag from all that travel, contradicted himself with the possibility that Iran would, as he put it, get involved in the nuclear business again.
Now, if it does, We're always there. It won't be me. It'll be somebody else, but we're there. We'll have to do something about it.
So much for the president for life idea. Donald Trump is admitting that 4 years from now, he won't be president. And maybe the next president or the president after that or the president after that will have to deal with Iran again on nuclear weapons, which is exactly why President Obama and Secretary of State John Kerry successfully negotiated a deal with Iran in which Iran pledged in writing to never develop nuclear weapons and to allow the United States to monitor what they were doing inside Iran and inside their military facilities and allow international observers in there. Because that sort of thing involves paperwork, which also involves reading, which Donald Trump is incapable of doing and even thinking about, never mind caring about.
The way I look at it, they fought, the war's done, and, you know, I could get a statement that they're not going to go nuclear. We're probably going to ask for that, but they're not going to be doing it. But they're not going to be doing it anyway. They've had it. They've had it.
So there's Donald Trump, once again today, becoming the first president who has ever dealt with Iran who believes now that Iran has had it. Iran has definitely just given up and given up its nuclear ambitions. That makes Donald Trump the most trusting and gullible American president ever to deal with the Iranian dictatorship.
But I've asked Marco, do you want to draw, I just asked him the question as we were walking on the stage, do you want to draw up a little agreement for them to sign? Because I think we can get them to sign it. I don't think it's necessary.
He doesn't think it's necessary. And so Donald Trump, who now trusts Iran, doesn't think it's necessary to negotiate an agreement in writing with Iran. And simpleton Donald Trump thinks a nuclear deal with Iran is something that you can just ask the Secretary of State to draw up a little agreement for them to sign. Thinks that's how it works. And that's the kind of thought that can just occur to you when you're walking on stage to do a press conference. That's how this stuff works in Donald Trump's tiny mind. That's how much planning Donald Trump thinks is involved in something like the extraordinary and historic nuclear deal with Iran that John Kerry negotiated. And Donald Trump, in the single stupidest diplomatic act by an American president in foreign policy involving Iran in the 21st century, simply ripped up. And that's why Benjamin Netanyahu went to war with Iran. That's why Donald Trump dropped bombs on Iran, because Donald Trump ripped up the nuclear agreement in which Iran pledged not to develop nuclear weapons and pledged transparency for international monitors to check on what Iran was doing in all the kinds of military sites that Israel and the United States bombed. Donald Trump blabbed on about how much he trusts Iran now and how much he doesn't care if there's an agreement.
We're going to talk to them next week with Iran. We may sign an agreement. I don't know. To me, I don't think it's that necessary. I mean, they had a war, they fought. Now they're going back to their world. I don't care if I have an agreement or not. The only thing we'd be asking for is what we were asking for before about we want no nuclear, but we destroyed the nuclear. In other words, it's destroyed. I said, Iran will not have nuclear. Well, we blew it up. It's blown up to kingdom come. And so I don't feel very strongly about it. If we got a document, wouldn't be bad. We're going to meet with them, actually. We're going to meet with them.
Did you hear what he actually said in the middle of that gibberish? He said these words exactly. They fought, and now they're going back to their world. I don't care if I have an agreement or not. So Iran fought, and now they're going back to their world. In other words, Donald Trump is asking nothing of Iran after dropping bombs on Iran that makes him feel like a warrior. Donald Trump says that they're just going to go back to their world. They're going back to their world, meaning Iran's dictatorial regime. They're going back to their world. In other words, they're going back to doing whatever they were doing before and whatever they want to do. And Donald Trump doesn't care. Donald Trump is totally fine with that. And that's not what you do when you win wars. When you win a war, you tell the other side what to do. When we won World War II, we told Germany and Japan exactly what they would be allowed to do and what they would not be allowed to do for many, many years to come. And Germany and Japan fully obeyed the orders of the victorious United States of America, because that's how it works when you really win a war. Donald Trump has not won a war, and there is no war on the horizon that Donald Trump will win.